is going on, all you wonderful A-plussers out there? It is I, Stuart, here once again with another Superman and Lois review. This time I'm going to be talking about episode number 3. Yes, I know I skipped episode number 2. Unfortunately, I was on vacation, so I didn't really have a chance to get around to it. I thought I was going to have some time while I was away, but unfortunately I wasn't able to, so I do apologize for that. But I will, however, give you my brief thoughts on the episode, since I'm already talking about it. I did think episode 2 was quite an amazing episode, extremely emotional, especially at the end when Lois kind of reveals that she has breast cancer. I also am really enjoying the Bruno Mannheim, the actor they got for him. He's doing such an amazing job. I really liked him on The Walking Dead, and it's really intriguing seeing him play basically a completely different type of character, because on The Walking Dead, very compassionate, and here, very brutal, but I really do like that about him. And what's really cool too is that we got a type of villain who isn't necessarily evil per se. It's hard to say for sure, because obviously we see him doing quite a bit of questionable things. We know that he's the leader of Intergang, but we also do find out that his intentions are pretty good, and that he has actually done some good with all the crime that he's done in the past, such as he's basically really turned around the suicide slums. And I really like that exchange that he has with Superman, where he basically kind of calls Superman out, saying that, oh yeah, you save people's lives, but you don't really change their lives. You don't really save people's souls in a lot of ways, I guess you could say, because he'll save someone who's falling off a building, but what about the people that are inside their house hanging themselves, things like that? What about kind of the smaller scale crimes that Superman doesn't get around to? And that's what kind of leads to that big debate. How much should Superman really, put himself out there when it comes to saving the world? How much is too much? Because, there's that whole thing where Superman, yes, he's there to save people, but he also isn't there to interfere with human history. Essentially, we as people still have to learn to adapt and evolve on our own. If we have one, all-powerful being solving all of our problems for us, then we as people can't grow. And that seems to be a kind of thing that's going to happen between Bruno Mannheim and Superman, a bit of a debate between the two of them, which to me is kind of interesting, because that's kind of the biggest thing that was known to be the big conflict between Lex Luthor and Superman. And we do know that Lex Luthor is coming back later in this season, so I am kind of curious. This kind of leads me to even more thinking that rather than Lex Luthor and Bruno Mannheim working on opposite sides, or on different sides with different goals, it does kind of lead me to think that maybe they are actually in cahoots together. Like Bruno Mannheim might be working for Lex Luthor while Lex Luthor is in prison, and maybe he's doing this because Lex Luthor actually did a lot more for Bruno Mannheim and his community than Superman ever did. At least that could be how we see it through his perspective. It's really hard to say. But regardless, there's still a lot we really don't know when it comes to Intergang and Bruno Mannheim going forward. But everything we've gotten set up here, I think, is amazing. And that definitely includes Lois's obsession with tracking this man down, because here's the next big thing I gotta talk about, man. The breast cancer storyline, which I think a lot of people are really talking about, and I see a lot of people mentioning the same thing. And this is what's kind of challenging about this review, is trying to look for a way to say something new, but it's really hard to, because I feel like all the YouTubers I kind of watch that also review the show have also kind of covered this. It's very emotional. Everyone's processing this in a very different way, which feels very realistic. I think the most Lois Lane thing about this whole storyline is her kind of refusing treatment at first, or at the very least constantly looking for an excuse to not go to her treatment. Now, obviously, this is two completely different scales. Obviously, I'm not trying to compare myself to Lois Lane at all, but I know how that is when you're trying to put something off that you need to get around to, but it's something that's going to be such a pain in the butt, whether it's cleaning your room, whether it's getting done some homework, something along those lines, and you look for every excuse not to do it. Or, in my particular case, when it comes to just overall writing, I'll sit at my computer trying to think of ideas, but then I just kind of will constantly be like, oh, you know what, the room's a bit of a mess, I should clean first. I just got this new video game, I should probably play that first. Now, again, completely different scales. I'm not trying to say that I know exactly what that's like. I am not. But I am trying to say that, in terms of her not wanting to get done what needs to get done and constantly looking for an excuse not to do it, that I kind of get to a very small degree. But basically, she's refusing to go to her chemo treatment because there's always a reason revolving around Bruno Mannheim, and she and Chrissy are teaming up in order to try to figure out what exactly it is that he's up to, and also trying to look for evidence to basically use against him. Now, Chrissy, of course, doesn't know this at first. She doesn't even know that Lois is missing her appointment. And what I really like is the challenge that it comes to trying to get someone to do what they need to do, but also knowing that the more you push them to do it, the more they're not going to want to do it. So you have this struggle when it comes to Chrissy and Clark. They both want her to get the treatment, but also the more it seems that they try to tell her, you can't keep blowing this off, the more she tries to blow it off even more. The more it kind of irritates her, because to her, it feels like everyone's like treating her like she's completely fragile. And that's just, Lois Lane doesn't want to be treated that way. Something I didn't think of until watching episode 3 is that a lot of times, whenever you have bad writing for Lois Lane, the biggest thing is that she always puts herself into stupid situations where she gets captured and then Superman has to go out of his way to save her. And, it happened, I believe it happened in the Christopher Reeve Superman movies. And then it happens in a bunch of Superman comics every now and then. But good Superman writing will always have Lois and Clark working as a team rather than, Superman just constantly going in to save Lois Lane, right? And that's what the show has done so well for so long. And it's only now that Lois is kind of getting herself in the way, and her getting in the way is, again, just because you can kind of see it's not because she's stupid. It's because of the absolute huge amount of stress and depression that she's under, with what she's kind of going through right now. So I love the fact that it really took 3 episodes and 3 seasons for them to have an episode like that, where Lois gets captured out of pure stupidity and not because she's being brave or her and Superman are working together. It took them that long for something like that to happen, and there was a reason it happened. It didn't happen because she was just being stupid. Again, I gotta keep praising the writing on this show because it's just absolutely brilliant. There's also a subplot going on with the kids, and of course the kids being Jonathan, Jordan, and Natalie in this case, where basically the truck that Jonathan had gotten from Talrow had gotten stolen, and he believes it was from his girlfriend's dad, which he has quite a bit of good reasons to suspect that. For one, he's acting incredibly creepy. Basically just like, oh man, I can't really describe him without like getting demonetized, but yeah, just he's the kind of guy you look at and you're just kind of like, I want to keep my distance from him. But regardless, his car gets taken, and basically because Jonathan doesn't want to get his girlfriend's dad thrown in prison, he, Jordan, and Natalie all team up to try and get the truck back. And what follows is a pretty awesome one take fight scene where it's basically Jonathan running to the truck, and basically it's in a room that's full of sleeping gas. So he's doing this while he's holding his breath, and while he's like running past all these different thugs that are trying to get him. Jordan and Natalie are kind of taking most of them out, but it was cool to see Jonathan actually take one guy out on his own. I don't know how realistic that is, because I mean, Jonathan is a high schooler and this dude looks like he was about in his 30s or something. So a bit silly to think that Jonathan was able to take him out, but I didn't care. It was a pretty cool scene regardless. Now, obviously it wasn't actually a one take scene. It was one of those scenes that were meant to look like it was a one take scene, but it was a very well done. I'm not sure if there's a word for that when it's when it's meant to look like it was done in one take, but it's not. But it was a very well done fake one take scene. So I don't mind fake one take scenes as long as they're well done, as long as it's not super obvious when they're changing cameras or changing shots. And in this particular case, I did think it was really well done. The only real nitpick I have is when he drives the truck out of the building, is that there was some kind of bad CG. And the only reason I'm really nitpicking this is because this whole episode has such an amazing cinematic look to it. There is this dream sequence when we start to this episode. And this dream sequence shows Metropolis just crumbling to pieces. And I've seen Marvel movies that don't look this good. It's kind of amazing. Again, looking at Superman and Lois on the CW. Not the type of show you normally suspect to look this good, basically, because it's a CW show, and obviously I'm sure it's got a bigger budget than The Flash or other Arrowverse shows out there. But I don't imagine it having that, I don't imagine having a Peacemaker budget, per se. But yet with the budget that they're given, it's kind of amazing what they're able to pull off. And because of that, when you have a scene where the CG isn't the best, it does tend to stick out just a little bit more. But that being said, again, it was such a phenomenal scene. I didn't mind that the CG looked a little bad for just a brief moment. I thought what we got around it was so cool, it didn't matter. And now we got to talk about the last thing, and that is the Lana Lang storyline. Where this ended, I did not see this coming at all. Let me just say that right now. And that might have been a bad thing in terms of writing, but I'll get a little more into that as I go. So in the previous episode, Lana Lang, of course, being the mayor, is trying to look into what Mayor Dean was kind of bringing up to her. And that's when she gets a call from him, and he tells Lana to look into a specific thing in the mayor's office when it comes to basically what I'm assuming is going to be something that ties Smallville into Bruno Mannheim, and it's going to kind of show how he's connected to Smallville. So she's basically investigating her own office when suddenly she's attacked by Onomatopoeia, and luckily she is of course saved by John Henry Irons before things get too bad. But Mayor Dean is killed, and Lana Lang is clearly a bit shooken up, which is, to an extent very, very understandable. Now, something really interesting about this is that Onomatopoeia actually recognizes John Henry Irons, and it's revealed that Onomatopoeia was the one who killed John Henry Irons. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how that plays out later on in the season. But Lana Lang, keep in mind, is a bit shooken up. Now, this was all in episode 2. Now, here's where kind of my nitpick comes in, is that because this is a different episode from episode 3, and it's not brought up as much as it really should have been, to my opinion. When we get to episode 3, we see Lana Lang is being quite harsh to everyone. And I don't mean she's just an absolute asshole to everyone. She's not quite that bad, but she definitely is a bit passive aggressive to an extent. And it seems at the very end of the episode, when Sarah kind of calls her out on this, says, hey, you're being a bit bossy. This is when we get something that, to me almost felt out of nowhere, where we get Lana Lang basically slapping Sarah, and then, regretting it immediately afterwards, of course, because Lana isn't, a terrible person. She isn't the kind of person that would just do that and, feel no sympathy or anything. So, it was a very, surprising moment for sure. But I do kind of think and I think it all has to do with the pacing of how it happened. I think if it happened in the same episode with Onomatopoeia trying to kill her, it would have made a lot more sense. But I think because we had a whole episode where it's barely brought up, it's kind of brought up when, they're of course installing the security into her office. To me, it just didn't seem like they did enough to really show how stressed Lana is, because clearly, she acted out because of, probably, it was likely because of the stress of being the mayor, and then also being shooken up from the fact that she almost died. And then on top of that, her, ex-husband now thinking that she might be having a relationship with someone else. So it was all those things stacked up, which led her to eventually kind of and then of course, Sarah being Sarah, talking back to her, led to her slapping Sarah. To me, the elements were all there. I just didn't think they were shown as well as they should have been. So while I do give the writers a lot of props for really going down this road, I do think that it should have been built up just a little bit more before we got to where they ended things in that episode, if that makes sense. But that all being said, guys, this was again another very, very solid episode. This season just continues to impress me me. It's getting better episode after episode, to my opinion. You know, I mentioned how the first episode was surprisingly hilarious, had like a lot of comedy, and so it's so interesting, you know, looking at these two episodes 2 and 3, and kind of realizing that maybe that was why, because they knew that people were going to be getting hit in the feels, so they wanted to start things on, you know, a funny note before really getting into a kind of darker area, you know, which is something that the writers of the show did tell us about beforehand. And now watching the season playing out, I definitely see what they were talking about. This definitely, you know, 4 episodes in, I can already say, at least in terms of kind of the human aspect of Superman and Lois, this is definitely kind of a dark area for them to go in, and I admire them for that, and I really look forward to seeing how it all plays out. But of course, guys, at the end of the day, these are just my A+ opinions. We here at A+ opinions always want to know what you guys think, so definitely let me know your thoughts on the episode in the comments below. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and then also that notification bell if you want to be notified whenever we drop new content. But of course, above all, guys, don't forget to keep it A+, and I will talk to you all later. Goodbye.